You're listening to Inside Outer Limits on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
December the 1st, 2018 will see issue 17 of Outer Limits magazine published. Have you subscribed yet? If not, you'll be missing out on the following. Madam Mig passes away. MJ12, hoax? Is real evidence being hidden? Why UFOs could not be entirely explained by human technology. 2 lots of photographic evidence are examined. We revisit a classic UFO encounter from Greece. 100 years after the armistice, we take a look at the Angel of Mons. A real-life abduction case in They Came in the Night. The Greys revealed. Peter Robbins remembers art, life and UFOs, and he thinks about Bud Hopkins. Life on Mars? The Road to Pascagoula, a research strip from 1981, which is a review of this classic abduction with new, never-before-heard information. The Kerry Island UFO from Ireland in November 2018 will bring you the latest information on the new case. Subscribe now and do not miss out. £9 a year for UK or $12 for US plus a PayPal fee for 6 issues a year. Subscribe at the magazine website chris0597.wixsite.com/outer-limits-mag. Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Inside Outer Limits radio show with myself, Chris Evers, and of course my co-host Philip Mantle. Hi Phil, how are you doing?
Good evening, Christopher. I'm hunky-dory at this end, thank you.
Oh, it's Christopher this week, is it? Well, I don't know. I don't know. So how are you keeping, Phil? What's been going on?
Well, everything's fine here. Preparing books for Flying Disc Press for next year. So I've literally been editing them and preparing them for publication. And that'll continue right up until Christmas. So hopefully get most of them ready.
Excellent. I understand you've actually just recently got a publisher in Japan, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the gentleman who's coming up, we're going to speak to this evening is Calvin Parker.
Excellent.
And for those who are not aware, I published Calvin's own book earlier this year, and which went on to be an Amazon bestseller. And we'd already sold the rights to the Spanish and German outfits, but I've been communicating with a chap in Japan, and in no time at all, we signed the deal, and he translated the book almost, in an instant, and it's out now in Japan as an ebook. So, and hopefully later next year, maybe in paperback as well. But that's only a maybe. But it is out in Japanese.
Good heavens. There's no stopping you, Phil. 1 minute Pontefract, the next minute you've taken over the world, mate. Well done.
That's my plan.
Oh, dear me. Okay, so shall we introduce Calvin?
Well, yes. I mean, our guest this evening, all the way from Moss Point, Mississippi, who will be a gentleman who will be one of the main speakers at the Outer Limits Magazine Conference in Pontefract next year, is my friend, I'm pleased to say, Calvin Parker. Good evening, Calvin.
Hey, how are y'all today?
Well,
hi, Calvin. Nice to speak with you.
It's great to speak to you, Calvin. I mean, you and I have spoken many times on Skype, but this is the first time on our Inside the Outer Limits. I'd like to thank you for taking the time out this evening, Calvin. I know you're about 6 hours behind us there, but just like to make you welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's about lunchtime here. I don't know what, probably about 6 there, isn't it, in the evening?
That's right. Now, for those who were not aware, Calvin was one of 2 gentlemen who, on October the 11th, 1973, on the Pascagoula River in Mississippi, decided to go fishing for the evening. Calvin, to this day, is still a keen fisherman. His partner that night was Charles Hickson, who's sadly no longer with us. And what took place, on that evening has become one of the classic close encounters that we have on record. And but before we go into that, Calvin, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Calvin Parker? For those who've never met you before, who are you? What have you done with your life, Calvin?
Well, I hadn't done a whole lot with my life, but I'm just a little country redneck uneducated redneck boy. And I told somebody the other day that at one time in my life, and that was the day of this abduction, I got a physical, I got hard, I got fired, and everything else on the same day. So I've had quite a time getting here. I've jumped from job to job. I've owned a construction business. And, other than that, I just love to fish every minute, every day.
You've worked around the world as well, though, Calvin, haven't you?
Oh, yes, I have. My job's carried me many places. I've been in the North Sea, Singapore, Libya, Alaska, and the Aleutian Chains, just a little bit of everywhere. And it wasn't the life that I planned. The life I planned was to get married, buy a house, pay for it all my life, own a car, and then retire and fish. But it didn't quite work out that way. It's just kind of the opposite.
Well, you've been around the world, Calvin, but you've never been to West Yorkshire, have you?
I have not, and I am looking so forward into being there. I guess it's this August, isn't it?
It's August the 17th, 2019. You'll be in sunny Pontefract in the town hall. You'll receive a warm welcome, and we're all looking forward to it.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely. I've got to agree with that 100%. Can I just point something out to you, Calvin?
Yes, sir.
If you do exams at what we call at school, what you would probably call high school. Me and Phil had this conversation the other day, actually. All it proves is that you can remember certain questions, certain answers to certain questions at that particular time. I personally don't think there's any more valuable experience than living a life. And, so more power to you. That's what I say.
Oh, thank you. And I've seen some really dumb people that had some good educations.
So, exactly.
Give me somebody a little bit of common sense anyhow. Somebody asked, why did you go to school? And I always said, I guess it was to meet my wife. They said, well, how did you do that? Well, at 15 years old, I was driving her school bus. And when she went to get off, the second day I was driving, I just closed the door in her face. So we skipped school and went places. And I thought her daddy was going to kill me then, but I didn't care, it's just one of them things. But
at the age of 15, we can all take on the world, can't we? And nothing worries us.
Oh, yeah. No reason to worry about too much. I had already been to the creek and throw the 8-pack of them little small Miller ponies they drink over here in the water to keep them cold. And we had a lunch made and all. Of course, down here in the South, a lunch isn't much, just whatever you catch you want to eat, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we move forward in time, Calvin, I mean, how did you meet Charles Hickson, old Charlie? How did you come across him?
Well, actually, everybody said that Charlie was a good friend of mine, but he really wasn't. He was a friend of my father's. And I've known Charlie, I guess, since I was 6 years old. We all lived in a little small town. Him and my father used to fish together. And Charlie's kids and myself, we and brother would go fishing with them a lot of times. So I got to know him and his whole family. But Charles was kind of quiet and reserved, most of the time. And then the only time I really got to know him was when I took a job with him in Pascagoula, and this was October the 10th. And I didn't get to know him as a friend long because, October the 12th, I got fired and went back home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about why you got fired, Calvin. I mean, you'd known Charlie a while, but, not up close and personal. You went to work with him in the shipyards there. Was it Ingalls Shipyard?
No, actually, it was F.B. Walker and Son Shipyard.
That's right. So you went to work with him, and then who was it who decided to go fishing on October the 11th? Was it you or Charlie?
It was really Charlie's idea because I didn't bring no fishing equipment with me. I come down on the 11th and I rented a room from Charlie in his apartment that he was living in. He gave me a job. So on the 11th, October the 11th, we went to work, and it was a hot day for October. I mean, it was warm, humid. So we worked all day, and about noon, Charlie, while we was eating lunch, he said, "Why don't we go fishing this evening, kind of wind down a little while?" And I thought that was a good idea. I said, "Well, Charlie, I don't have no fishing equipment." He said, "Well, I got some you can borrow." I said, "I don't borrow people's fishing equipment." He said, "No, we'll go home. You can use my fishing equipment." Now, I don't know if y'all know, but down in the South, a person's fishing equipment is sacred to him. You know, you just soon borrow his wife as you had his fishing equipment. So I said, "Well, if it's that personal to you, Charlie, I'll borrow your fishing equipment." So we rode to his house and picked up some fishing equipment. He gave me one of his worst ones that was wore out and all, because that's just what you did. We drove, it was about a 15-minute ride to where we was going to fish. He said, "Oh, I know a great place." And I wish now I had known what he said, because I wouldn't have went there. And I said, "All right." So we started out at an old grain elevator, which is just below the Saltpeter shipyard where we was ended up at the end. But we started out at a grain elevator that wasn't doing much good. And he said, "Well, let's go over to the old Saltpeter shipyard that I fish at all the time." I said, "Well, okay." So we drove over there, and Buddy was in a mess. There was postage signs up, and there was trash all over the place. And I said, "Charlie, you know, they got postage signs up here. Let's not go fishing here. I don't want to go to jail." "No, I do it all the time." And that I didn't doubt, even if it was posted. So we kind of made our way, got our fishing equipment, struggled to get down to where the old pier was, got an old log that we drug up over there, sat on that log, and just cast it out. And we was sitting there waiting on a bait, but while we was sitting there waiting on a bite, I was noticing an old ship all the way across the river, a big one. It was probably a Coast Guard cutter or a Noah ship. It was one or the other, but it was a big old ship. And I was thinking to myself, now, how does something made out of steel float on water? That just amazed me all the time, how something made out of steel, or they even have concrete ships or anything that could float. And about that time, I seen some blue hazy lights coming from behind me that was reflecting across the water. And I thought, uh-oh, you know, they here to run us off. They don't want us fishing here. This is posted. So I stood up, and about that time, Charlie stood up.
When you say they were going to run you off, did you think that was the police coming?
Oh, I just knew it was the police, because it was the same color lights that was on the patrol cars, just kind of in the state of Mississippi, they're kind of blue, but they're kind of a hazy looking blue. And one of them could go a long ways. When they turn them on, they just reflect everywhere. And that's what was going on. And I was thinking to myself, we in a lot of trouble. You know, they're going to run us off, probably fine us $50, which $50 in the 70s was a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely. It is today for some people.
Oh, it still is for me.
Exactly.
That's fish bait money. So.
Oh, excellent. Sorry for laughing, but I just found that fantastic that you would view it as fish bait money. That's fantastic.
Oh, yeah. It costs, for live bait on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, it costs $40 a trip to go fishing. And I used to go 5-6 days a week before I met Philip. Then that changed all that. But we was sitting there fishing, and we noticed the lights, and we stood up and turned around and looked, and all of a sudden the blue lights just faded out, and a bright light shined on us, and it was almost paralyzing the way this light did. I mean, you had to squint your eyes because you really couldn't see. So by the time our eyes adjusted a little bit, we seen something floating. Well, we couldn't tell if it was floating or not toward us, but it was coming toward us, and it was really moving fast. And I was wondering, And, you know, fear didn't have time right then to hit. And I was thinking to myself, now, how can they move across this mess this fast? Because the grass was probably 5 foot tall at times, and yet they was just going right through it, and then all that junk. And when they got closer, then I noticed. I was thinking, boy, you've had it now. So it was some bulky. Now I call them robots. Now I don't know what they were, but it was bulky, gray-looking creatures. Kind of had wrinkled skin. Favored an elephant or a manatee, if you know what a manatee is. But it was just real rough-looking skin. Well, two of them got a hold of Charlie, and one of them got a hold of myself. Well, like I say, I didn't have time to really be afraid, not to get my adrenaline up or anything. But I was thinking about where I could run, and it was nowhere to run. I mean, we had debris on the left and the right. We had water off in front of us, and it was full of old debris and stuff. So, you know, but when it got a hold of us, it just like relaxed all at one time. But I couldn't move anything but my eyes. Now, from this point on, I can't speak for Charlie because I didn't see Charlie no more until we come out of the craft. But this thing got a hold, and it automatically levitated up a couple of foot off the ground and started moving toward the craft. And I was sitting here thinking, you know, I could think, I could see, and I could hear, and I could smell. And I was thinking, how did he pick me up without breaking my arm? It just levitated us up. And we scooted on toward the craft, and as I got toward the craft, I caught myself just looking in the craft and trying to see some lights. But, you know, it's hard to see without being able to turn your head. You just look inside, and out of the walls, it looked like that's where the light was coming from. It looked like the light was just painted into the walls. It was what I guess they call illuminating, and it was still bright and still blinding. But that's what I had my mind set on, and I was actually looking for, you know, anything I could see to tell about what was fixing to happen to us. And then he kind of jogged off to the left with me. Now, I'm sure Charlie went off to the right because I didn't see no more rooms over there on the left, and made a little right turn. That's when we came into a little room, and he laid me on an examination table. I guess it was a table. I don't know if it's even a table there, but he laid me on something. Now, I couldn't feel it, nothing on my back where he laid me, but I was at about a 45-degree angle and just suspended there. So I figured it had to be a table. Then all of a sudden, I was looking straight up because I couldn't turn my head to look anywhere else. Something about the size of a deck of cards just came down out of the ceiling. It stopped about a foot from my eyes right in front of me, and it made a clicking noise. Well, it clicked there, then it went to my right ear, and it clicked, and behind my head and clicked, and went to the left of my head and clicked, and then it got in that position, went straight back up into the ceiling. Well, by this time, you would think that fear would just really overcome you, but, you know, for some reason it didn't. And later on, I found out that this one, when he picked me up, had gave me an injection mark in the arm, and that really came from the hospital there, from the doctors at the emergency room. Now, this is the next day. But I figured I was injected with some kind of tranquilizer or something, where all I could do was just look, but I couldn't turn my head still. And, you know, I was thinking the other day, did I even bat my eyes? I can't remember even batting my eyes when all this was going on. It's funny how you can start thinking back on things and see the little bitty stuff that's happened and wonder about it, but not really know for sure about it. So as I was laying on this table, looking up, and this deal done shot back up into the ceiling, this old big ugly thing done backed up out of the way. Now, I think he was probably some kind of a soldier or something, but he was robotic, I believe, because he moved without I don't know if I could, how to say it, but it was not like a conscious move. It just mechanical moved. But then on the right, I seen something kind of coming toward me, and I rolled my eyes over and looked, and it was a different looking creature. It was more of a female or a feminine looking creature. And everybody asked me, well, how do you know it was a female? Well, I really didn't know it was a female or not. But this animal sense about a man can sense when he's around a female, like a female could sense when there's a male. And it just felt like a female. It was more feminine looking. Now, I rolled my eyes to look to see about what was fixing to happen, because I guess that little tranquilizer stuff was starting to wear off a little bit. And she just kind of, or it, whatever it was, just reached up and kind of pinched me on the side of the chin with her fingers. And the things that I noticed about her, she had fingers where the other one didn't have fingers. It had like crab-like pinchers on its hand or mittens or something. But this one had fingers, definitely, and was able to grab my skin and just kind of mash it together. And I don't know why, I guess trying to figure the texture of my skin. Then all of a sudden, she took her finger and run it down my throat and back in behind that thing that hangs down in your throat. I don't know what they call it, but I call it the little hang-me-down, and kind of curled her finger trying to go up into my nasal passage because it was choking me. Then I was starting to get scared, you know, because I was choking. I couldn't catch my breath. My nose started bleeding and all. And it was just like she had talked to me. Like I could hear the voice just as plain as anything. And her mouth didn't move because I was sitting there with my eyes open looking at it. And I'm not even going to tell you what I was thinking. But she said, just like she had told me, don't worry, we're not going to hurt you. Well, that kind of calmed me down, but, you know, it's hard not to worry when you got somebody's finger down behind your little hang-me-down in your throat.
Yeah.
You get to thinking, well, you're choking to death, you're dying. And she pulled her fingers out. My nose started bleeding, and I was just bleeding everywhere. And she kind of made a little mumbling sound. And it's hard to describe it, but when she did, the old big ugly one came back in, and automatically when he grabbed me by the arm again, and I call him a he or the robot or whatever he is, a soldier, it just settled me down. It was just like he gave me another shot, and I wasn't worried about nothing. And the bleeding just kind of stopped right away. Well, she backed up, and I rolled my eyes to see, and she kind of backed up out of the way, and he picked me up and he carried me out the door, deposited me back out on the river with my arms stretched out facing toward that ship that I was looking at before I came. And then this is the first time that I heard Charlie, and Charlie had jumped up off the ground and said, Calvin, you okay, son? And I heard him, and when we turned around and looked, this thing just picked up a little bit off the ground, and it shot up into the air like lightning and disappeared. So
So did fear kick in at this point at all, Calvin?
It did. You know, I got scared, but I wasn't totally out of my mind. All I knew is something happened, and I didn't know what happened. And to be honest with you, what I thought had happened, Ingalls Shipyard was probably 3 city blocks down from where we were. And they work on this military equipment. And I was thinking to myself, well, they got a bunch of these rednecks got out playing with this, and they pulled the joke of the century out. And they off drinking beer now, and we left here in a bad situation. I wanted to go ahead and slide up and get into the car, but Charlie told me, you know, let's talk about this. I said, yeah, let's talk about it. This didn't happen, Charlie. I don't want nothing to do with it. We didn't see this. Let's get up and go to work in the morning. Well, wait a minute. Let's talk about it some more. I said, there's nothing to talk about. It didn't happen. I said, you tell them anything you want to tell anybody, but this didn't happen to me. Well, he agreed. Well, we just won't tell nobody. But going back to the car, when we was headed to the car, it took a few minutes to get there. And I wasn't real wary then because I was thinking we're out of danger, if it was any danger, and I'm pretty sure it was. But and trying to figure out what happened. It happened so fast, we didn't have time to really get afraid, and our adrenaline really didn't have time to even kick in till a little bit later on. So we got back to the car, and the first thing I noticed when I looked in my door on the driver's side, Charlie was sitting on the passenger side, and he opened the door, and I noticed the glasses on the passenger side of the car was shattered in place. But when he opened the door, they fell out. And later on, I found out that that was safety glass, and they was designed just to shatter and stay in place in case you got in a wreck. Little shrivels wouldn't go all through you.
Yeah.
So we got in the car. I tried to crank the car. They wouldn't crank. For probably 15 minutes we tried. And all of a sudden, it just cranked. And we started backing out, and Charlie said, well, we're going to have to tell somebody. So in the 70s, there wasn't no such thing as a cell phone. I mean, it probably was, but we couldn't afford one if we'd had one. And, it wasn't no social media or anything. And they had blue laws in the state of Mississippi, and after a certain time of the evening, the stores shut down. They wasn't allowed to sell anything. So we backed out. He said, I'm going to call somebody. I'm going to call Keesler Air Force Base, which is in Biloxi, Mississippi. And I said, Charlie, you don't need to do that. Let's go on home. Let's forget this ever happened, because it's going to be a mess. I mean, law enforcement will know how they thought. If you called somebody in law enforcement, instead of innocent until proven guilty, you're guilty till you prove yourself innocent. And that's the way it is. And it's not supposed to be that way, but that's just the way that the law is here. So we went to a curb store, drove to a curb store. We pulled up, and there was a pay phone outside, and it took a dime. And we found some dimes, and Charlie got on it, and he called Keesler Air Force Base. They said, we don't fool with nothing like that anymore. We don't deal with the UFOs or anything no more. You need to call the local authorities, which would be the Jackson County Sheriff Department. And he turned around and he called the Jackson County Sheriff Department. And he come, I heard him talking. I don't know exactly what was saying. I didn't find that out until a little bit later on. But he said they'll be here in just a minute. They told us to wait. So it wasn't just a few minutes. I figured 5-10 minutes at the most. They showed up at the car, and they got out, and they looked inside the car, and they asked me to step out, and they gave me a field sobriety test. And that's to tell if I was drinking or on dope or anything, I guess.
So sobriety test is to get you to walk along a straight line, make sure that you've had nothing to drink, etc., etc. And did they ask you any questions or anything during that test?
They did ask a few what I thought was stupid questions, and the first one they asked if I'd been drinking. Of course, if I had, I would have said no anyway. I said, well, hell no, I ain't drank nothing. Then they said, I want you to stand on your right foot and pick up your left leg, close your eyes, bend your head back, and touch your nose. I said, man, I can't do that if I'm sober. So, but anyhow,
not many of us can, yeah. Calvin. Not many of us can.
No, I was thinking, man, this is dumb. That stuff. If they give me one today, they'd really think I was drinking, clumsy as I am. But anyhow, I did everything they asked us to do. I walked the line. I counted backwards from 100 to 50, then from 50 to 100. Just little things like that. And they said, well, I need you to follow us to the sheriff's department. And I was thinking, that's stupid. If they thought I was drinking, they wouldn't want me to follow them in a car, but we did. We followed them up there. And then when we got there, they kind of separated Charlie. They took him into a room and me into a room, and they started asking a lot of questions. They asked me, they said, well, what happened? I said, I don't know. All I know is y'all just pulled up here and started making me jump up and down on one foot. And he said, no, what happened? He said, the other guy said something happened, y'all. What happened? So I didn't get in a whole lot of detail with him. I just said, I don't know. Well, in the meantime, they asked Charlie what had happened. Buddy, he wouldn't have been a good spy because he just spilt his guts on everything, actually. And they listened to the stories. Then they took us both and put us into a room together. But what we didn't know when they put us into this room and where I slipped up and let them know that I was in on all this too, they had a tape recorder in a drawer. And they was going to listen to Charlie and I talk between ourselves. And that's where the secret tape from the sheriff's department come about. And it showed by this time I had settled down. And I was pretty worried about things then because, I've done graduated from getting abducted to trespassing on private property, taking a sobriety test to see if I was drinking, and sitting up at the sheriff's department being interrogated. And one of them told me, if all this was a hoax and you're going to jail for a long time, and I just completely said, well, what's the damn hoax anyway? I didn't know. So when we was in the room together and Charlie and I was talking, well, we did talk about a little bit about what happened out there. And he expressed the fears, and I expressed my fears also on the tapes. And, some of it was pretty graphic, And I never would have figured Charlie would have been afraid of anything because, I always kind of looked up to him and all coming up as a child. And I didn't figure he was the type man to ever be scared of anything. But Charlie had fear on him that night. Now, I had more fear than anybody could possibly have. So they listened to the tape, and the head sheriff, Fred Diamond, came in, and he told us, well, y'all go on home, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. So we did. We took him at his word. We left and went home and got there, and of course, Blanche was in there, and she had something cooked to eat. And that Blanche is Charlie's wife. And she asked us to come sit down. I just told him I wasn't hungry. On the way home, I expressed to Charlie, maybe we ought to go get checked out. We could be contaminated with radiation, or we might have some kind of airborne disease. And it had just started settling in my mind that, something out of the ordinary happened, and we was exposed, and there was blood everywhere, and I knew that you could get a disease through blood. And radiation I was worried about because my father worked for the Atomic Energy Commission. He always had to wear a little badge when he worked with these radiation things on it and levels. So that's one thing that kind of bothered me, was maybe we're going to expose everybody in the world to some kind of bad disease or maybe some kind of radiation.
It must have been so hard just after what you just experienced, and the exposure to possible radiation, the experience you'd just gone through, being taken to the police. It must have been so hard, Calvin, to go back home and carry on as though absolutely nothing had happened.
That part would be the easy part to me. The hard part come dealing with the press and the people. The next day when we got up to go to work is when it got hard on me. Now, that night when we got home, I took all my clothes off. I put them in a bag, shoes, everything. I went into the shower, and I poured a gallon of bleach. There was a gallon of bleach that was sitting there in the bathroom, and I just took and poured it over my head and rubbed it in and washed it off with water. Now, that's how scared I was. And that bleach, I know it just had to eat you alive. But that I was worried about it. Then the next morning, I threw my clothes off in a dumpster when we walked out the door, and I made a mistake. If I had known what happened, I should have kept everything. And maybe later on, years later, they could have took DNA and compared it to something, because it was blood on everything. Now, we got up the next morning and went to work, got to the shipyard, and I noticed it was a lot of cars there. But see, this was just my second day on the job, so I didn't know how many cars were supposed to be there. But I knowed it was a lot. Well, when we brassed in and went into our workstations, it wasn't just a few minutes. They called us to come to the office. And I remember getting out while I was going to the office up there. And what made me remember this, one of my neighbors was one of the head people at the shipyard. And I just met him, figured out who he was down here, and he figured out who I was. While we was writing the book, while Philip and I was doing the book. And he said, what you been doing? I said, well, believe it or not, I'm writing a book. He said, what you writing a book on? And I explained. He said, no, Calvin. He said, I know who you are now. He said, I've been trying to figure out where I knew you from. But he said, that day I remember when they called you into that office, you was on your hands and knees out in the parking lot throwing up. So, yeah, you're right, I was. Now, that's how sick I was getting by then, because it was all kicking in then. So we made our way to the office, and they told us, look, we cannot conduct business because of the press calling the office. What happened to you guys? I thought, now, who in the world told them that anything happened? They said, we need to know because we're going to have to shut our office down. You can't even get a word in on the phone. We can't let y'all go out on the field because a man's going to want to talk to y'all when they find out what's going on. We can't conduct business with you two here. We're calling an attorney, which is their shipyard attorney. His name was Joe Camingo, and we're going to let him do a press release so we can get rid of this media here. We'll let him handle the media. So Joe come in and talked to us, and he knew what was going on. And I couldn't figure out in my mind who might have told the media about this, because I didn't think Charlie did, and I know darn well I didn't. So anyhow, we told the attorney what was happening, and he put together a press release. And I told him my concerns about being exposed to either radiation or needed a physical to make sure we didn't carry no germs. And that got his attention, because I noticed he kind of backed up and stayed away from us a little bit then. I just wanted to go hug his neck. Yeah. So he backed up, kind of stayed away. He did a press release. Well, about that time, the sheriff department showed up. And the detective that interviewed us that night, I heard him in there talking. And they set up a deal to go to the Singing River Hospital in Pascagoula to get us checked out. So that's the first thing they did. They took us to, after they gave their little press release, the attorney and the deputy and somebody else loaded up in the car with us. They took us to the Singing River Hospital. They gave us a good, thorough examination. They checked our arm, and they said it was puncture marks. Matter of fact, I had 2 puncture marks on mine. And then they did blood work, and I'd give anything if we could get a hold of the information they had then. But see, all that got destroyed in 2005 in Hurricane Katrina. Everything got underwater down here. I had 20 foot of water up on the roads.
Yeah.
So when we got through there and they released us, said we'll be fine, they made arrangements to take us to Keesler Air Force Base to get checked for radiation. So the detective drove us to Keesler, and the attorney was with us. And when we got to the gate, they flagged us on in. We didn't even have to stop at the gate at the Air Force Base. And they sent us to the back. They had an escort us back. And there was several guys standing there with their hazmat suits on. And it was soaking in then. You know, this is starting to get a little scary. So they separated us, took us one at a time and separated us. And they checked us for radiation. And then all of a sudden, you know, they hollered it was all clear. Well, I asked them if they found any, and they said, no, not really, nothing above normal. And I think a human body carries a little above normal anyway sometime.
Yeah.
So they said, now they want to see y'all inside. I said, who wants to see us? He said, we just got some people want to see you inside. So they escorted us down a long hall. And it wasn't really that far, but it didn't seem like we was ever going to get there. And they set us down into a conference room, and it was military brass, local authorities. We had like the mayors and local sheriff department and different authorities and all kind of military brass that was in there, pretty high ranking, I guess. And they set us down, and it wouldn't be what I would call an interrogation, but they asked us each to tell our story at a different time. And we did, and they was extremely nice. I mean, you couldn't ask for a nicer bunch of people. And but they was pretty serious. You could look at their face and tell how serious they were. Mm-hmm. And then they told us that we could go. So we walked back out, got into the car, went back to the shipyard. And when we got back to the shipyard, they told us, look, y'all have some people flying down from California or somewhere that wants to talk to you tomorrow and see you. But little did I know who it was. Well, I wouldn't have known who it was if they told me then. But it was Dr. Heineck and Dr. Harder from the University of California. And they had actually flew down on their own dime. I mean, nobody paid them to come. They come down here on their own time. Well, during the time we was waiting to see them, well, I think they went out to the site to look around and to talk to different people and witnesses. And it was the next morning before we got to see them. They brought us in. Dr. Heineck asked us what was going on. Well, he was talking to me while he was hypnotizing Charlie. And Charlie had agreed to be hypnotized, and I did also, except for when Dr. Harder started hypnotizing me. He didn't figure I could handle it, so he just kind of eased me back out of it. And I went back in and finished talking to him and Heineck together. And they were extremely nice, but really thorough about what they did. And I noticed they was taking a lot of notes, which I'd give anything to have his notes right now. And he did a press release to the press. And from what I understand, he said, and I didn't know this up until just here lately, you know, that he figured that something really happened that was traumatic to us, but he didn't know what. And I do know that he told the sheriff right there in front of us and that attorney, if they were acting, they should be in Hollywood because nobody could act out something this good. So that's kind of where they left that. And then just shortly after that, I got my butt in the car and went back home to Laurel, Mississippi. And that's where, you know, I started having other problems there. That's when reality really hit me when I got home. Because before I didn't have time to think about it, worry about it. I got home and I was at the house. It's just me and my brother there one night. And everything just come over me at one time. And that's when they said I had a nervous breakdown. But I don't believe it was a breakdown. I think the world just caught up with me by then. Because I ain't never seen so many reporters in my whole life. And they still tracking me down.
So, Calvin, I mean, neither you nor Charlie said anything to the media. So who do you think it was that let the story out? I mean, there was only you, really, Calvin, Charlie, and the police. So do you think it was somebody from the police department that let the story out?
Well, I tell you what I really think happened. You know, back in those days, you didn't have social media or anything, but everybody had a scanner where they scanned the police department and the fire department, just being nosy to see what was going on. And I think somebody might have heard it over the scanner. And the Mississippi Press building was right there by the police department, and they probably heard it on their scanner. And when they did, they probably went over and questioned the sheriff, and he probably gave them, well, you know, he had to tell them something. So he probably is the one that did it.
Right.
Not thinking.
So going back, for those that are not aware, or for those who've never heard of the case before, the creatures that you encountered, you know, what did they look like, Calvin? I mean, give us a description of what these things really looked like. Well, I mean, you were up close and personal with them.
Yeah, there was two different types, and there was two different looking ones. And now the one that came out, the one that I call the soldier, they had a grayish looking skin and probably 5 foot tall, no neck. Now Charlie said he's seen little antennas or something sticking out of them. I didn't see all that. It was more or less like a blur to me when I seen the facial features. Now I did notice their hands, because when that big hand reached and grabbed me, it looked like the pincher off a crab down here. And why I even come to that decision, I had just caught a crab and looked at their pinchers, and it had like mitten hands, and I just described it as a pincher, like a crab to the law. They had pretty long arms. Their legs, now I couldn't see the other one's legs, but this creature that come toward us, or the guy that come toward us, their legs was all together, like they was made together, but you could still see that they might have had legs, might have been standing in something to float them. And the movement was just mechanical wise on this one.
I mean, and again, this craft that you were taking on board, what did that look like? You know, describe that for us.
It was, I'm going to say 80 to 100 foot long, just estimate. Now, this is no definite measurements. And probably about 8-10 foot high. It looked oblong, kind of like a football, not like anybody would think a flying saucer would look, but it kind of looked like a football with two portholes on the left side of me, and I was facing it. So, you know, it was nothing like you never seen before. Now, the inside was just all kind of plain. And I didn't get a chance to, the doors had to slide because they wasn't hinged and didn't come in. So I know the doors had to slide there. And then the examination room, I really can't say much about it. I don't even know if there's an examination table in there.
So did you hear any noise or smells or anything like that?
I didn't smell any smells. Well, the smell that I smelled was normal. Down in on the coast, you got that fishy kind of smell that you smell all the time. And, you know, so it's not a real clean smell, and, you know, it might have disguised anything else. But as far as noises, the only noises I heard was when we was inside. I heard that clicking noise that came down out of that deck of cards I described. And then I heard this female creature kind of mumble down low into her voice a little bit. And that's when she summons the old big ugly one to come in there.
So, you know, we're a few weeks after the event now. You went back home and you ended up in the hospital, didn't you?
I did. And what had happened, I went to bed, and then I just broke out into a cold sweat, shaking and everything else. And my brother come in, and he got concerned. And I really wasn't going to the emergency room, but they kind of made me go. He made me go. And, I love my brother a lot. About anything he said, I would go along with, because he was more or less the brains of us.
So what happened when you went to the emergency room? What happened there?
Well, we went in. No, I was in the car, and he made them come out and get me. They put me in a wheelchair, and they took me in there, and then done a little bit of paperwork, and they just put me over in the corner, and I was getting worse and worse. And it went on. It seemed like hours that I was in there. I know it couldn't have been hours, but it was a long time I was in there. And he walked up and asked them when they was going to see me, and they told him just when they get to me. And I got to looking around in there. There wasn't nobody much in there. Maybe somebody had a cold or something. But I believed I was in pretty bad shape myself. So I asked my brother, I said, look, bud, why don't you go to the car and get my jacket, just stay out for a while or go on home, and I'll call you when we get through or something. Well, he wouldn't leave my side. So I finally got him to go back out to the car to get something for me. And when he did, I jumped up and threw the chair up against the thing, and it was on then. I mean, security come in there and tackled me and all that. But when they did, the good thing about it, there was also an ER doctor that come in, and he seen what was going on. Well, they popped a needle in me, and, I kind of calmed down. And he started asking questions, and he ate them out for not paying attention to me then. Said anytime anybody in this kind of shape came in here, he wanted them front row right then. So it was pretty dramatic. And he tried to get me to stay, but I wouldn't stay. I went on home. But he did give me a shot and some pills to calm me down for the night.
Right. Well, after the event, who did Dr. Harder examine you? Did he give you a physical?
He did.
The reason I ask this, because the people listening will know that Chris is the editor of Outer Limits magazine. And one of the things I tried to do after the book was published was track down documentation relating to the event, Calvin. We've not really been that successful. As you pointed out, a lot of it was washed away in Hurricane Katrina. However, and I did send you a copy of this, and what we're going to do, we're going to make this available as an exclusive to Outer Limits magazine next year, is we found a letter in the archives of the Center for UFO Studies, which was founded, of course, by Alan Hynek. And it talks of you and Charlie having a physical examination. This is in the first person. So whoever's doing the examination is writing this letter, and he confirms in the letter that both you and Charlie did indeed have puncture wounds.
Oh, and we did. And I remember them specially looking at them. Matter of fact, on my arm, I can't speak for Charlie because they had us separated. One was going in there and seeing him, but he got something the size of a Q-tip and run down into that puncture wound. And then when they got through, they put alcohol to bandage and all over it. And matter of fact, even today, you can kind of see a little puncture wound there, a scar.
So like I said, we're going to make that available later next year in Outer Limits magazine, because we're still on the track of documentation. We know, for example, notes were taken, recordings were made. What was one of the things was curious, Calvin, if you go back to when you went to Keesler Air Force Base. Now, I contacted the United States Air Force and asked under the Freedom of Information Act for any more information. They said they had none. Robert Todd, an investigator back in the 90s, had done the same thing, and he got the same reply, said they didn't have anything. And we published Robert's letters in your book. But one of the things that I'm curious about is that, in fact, we have a transcript of you and Charlie being interviewed at Keesler Air Force Base that day. This has come from the Air Force, and it lists at the top of it everyone that was present there. So how did they make the transcript? If they didn't record it in some manner or have someone taking notes at the time? So they must have had something there, even if it was just notes. Did you see anybody when you were at Keesler? Did you see anybody? Did you see a stenographer or anything like that, Calvin?
They did have like a court stenographer in there, and it was a her, and I noticed she had bars, so she had to be like a lieutenant or something, taking notes on one of them little machines. It's not a typewriter, but one of the little machines that you use in court to dictate on. And I think only they can probably read them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I assume that's where the transcript has come from. But we're still on the hunt for documentation, and maybe one day we'll strike lucky and find it, because we know that this was Dr. Hynek's, who's sadly no longer with us, his favourite case, and that certainly Charlie had his home telephone number, because one of the things I did was contact Hynek's two sons. One of them told me, I think he was about 10 or 11 years of age at the time, and he remembers answering the telephone, and it was Charlie Hickson, and he went and told his dad, Charlie Hickson's on the telephone for you. So, it was Hynek's favourite case. So, what happened after all this, Calvin? This has happened. You've been ill. You've been at the hospital just a few weeks afterwards. What happened from there? How did it affect your family? I mean, you were engaged to be married at the time, I believe. So where do you go from there?
Well, I went back home, and with the intentions of, actually, to be honest with you, I knew there was an article that come out in the paper, but not everybody in my family and her family actually got a newspaper or watched TV that much, because everybody worked. So I figured it would just die down, 5 minutes of glory, and that's the end of it. So I wasn't going to say nothing. I had no intentions of telling anybody, and I didn't tell nobody nothing. I never sat down my family and explained to them. I never sat down my friends. I never told her family about it, although they all knew about it, and they wouldn't ask me about it. And the reason I knew they knew, because when I was still in Pascagoula the night before, I seen Dr. Hynek and Harder. My mother and my brother had come down and got a motel room, and I went over and spent the night with them. And believe it or not, they was crying. She was crying when I walked in. He was too. He was scared. And I never talked to them about it that night. I just told them, look, I'm got something I have to do today. I'm going to work over here today, and I'll be home tonight, and I'll talk to y'all. And they just pacified them. So they left and went on back home, and I went and seen. That's when I had the meeting with Dr. Hynek and Dr. Harder the next day. And after that, I left and went back home. But when I got home, I didn't talk about it to nobody. I didn't want to talk because I was engaged to get married. This was October. In November the 9th is when I got married. And I said, well, her dad's a hard case, and I'll really have to, she was underage. I mean, as far as can speak for herself to get married, they would have to sign for her. 16 years old, and I figured that was all off. If he had found out about it, he'd figure me to be a nutcase. And
so, did you explain to your fiance, who became your wife, did you tell her anything about it?
Not a word. The only time we talked about it is when you and I, she started discussing writing a book, and we had talked to you, and we had actually started on the book, and there was pieces that she would come in there and I'd let her read, and then she'd ask me a few questions about it. But that's the only time we ever talked about it. Then I finally, since then, course, it's real popular here. She hears me on the Skype and the radio and stuff like that, and she'll listen to part of the story, but then she'll go on back to her room and won't listen to no more. And it came out on audio, and we did listen to it on the audio because I wanted to hear how the audio was. But that's the only time I've talked to her about it. The rest of the family, my mother knows about it. She read the book when it came out. I didn't feel like sitting down and explaining to everybody. So all my friends and all have been waiting all these years to hear it. And they asked me about it now. And I said, go get the book and read it. It's all in there. And that's the only way I know how to do it. You know, I don't want to, if you sit down now and explain it to everybody, you'll be explaining the rest of your life away. So it's just easier for them to go buy the book and read it. And then they got everything right there in front of them. Like you say, this is my leg. Calvin, you told me when we was doing the book and the reason I considered writing it, I told you that everybody always changes. The press usually make a change in anything you say to make it seem greater. Well, how in the world do you get it better than what it is? I mean, how do you explain something and make it more exciting than getting abducted or going through all this? It's no way. So there's no reason for the press to try to change everything. But when we met, you told me, well, document it. And that made a lot of sense. This is your legacy. Put it down. They won't change it. They can't change it. And that made a lot of sense to me.
Well, for those who are not, again, it's not a common story, but last year, to begin with, I republished the book that Charles Hickson co-authored with William Mendez. That came out in 1983, I think it was. And I obtained permission and I republished it. And when I was republishing it, I just thought, I knew Charlie Hickson had passed away, and I thought it would be nice to find Calvin. Because while I'm reading Charlie's book, Calvin, I'm thinking, wonder what Calvin makes of that. I wonder if that happened to Calvin, you know. And I thought it'd be nice if I could find you and just get an interview, just to bring things up to date. And my intentions were to put it in the back of the republishing of Charlie's book. But of course, you know, I happened upon you perhaps at the right time, Calvin. Tell us how you decided, you and Waynette, your wife, that perhaps a book might be the best way to go about things. How did that come about?
Well, we live in like a little subdivision, and one of our neighbors passed away at an early age, just a few houses down. Well, we went to what they call a wake down here. I don't know what it is, you know, in the UK, but it's a wake where you go in and you just sign a register and be with the family out there, you know, and show your concerns. So we was at this wake, and I messed up, and normally I don't sign my name to nothing, not even a check. But I signed it that day on the register. Well, everybody knowed my history around here because it had been for the Associated Press coming around hunting me one day. And they always thought that I was the one, but they wasn't for sure. So they got to reading the register, and somebody put two and two together again. And they knew that I was the one in 1973. Well, when that happened, a lot of people started coming up and talking and wanting my autograph, and I couldn't figure out what in the world we was going to do. I said, you know, this is really disrespectful of the family. So me and my wife just got in the car or the truck and drove off. And while we was driving off, Juanette had told me, why don't you write a book? So I told her, just passing, I said, you know, I don't have the education to write a book. You know, I don't have any majors in any kind of literature or nothing. I said, I tell you what, if a ghostwriter comes by and tells me they want to write a book, we'll do it. And just something to satisfy her to keep her mouth shut about it, because I was already tired of hearing about it, to be honest with you. So we went on home. Well, that night again, she brought it up. And I'll be darned, the next day, I got an email from Martin Willis,
Mm-hmm.
said that Philip was hunting me and wanted to know if it was okay to give him my contact information. Well, I didn't know Philip from anybody. I knew Martin from a little podcast that I'd done a while back. He had run up on me, and we just did a little podcast, and that's where Philip had got his information from. So Martin gave him permission, got permission, and he gave him my email address, and I emailed him the phone number, and we started talking. Well, it was the next day Philip called, and it just happened to be like a godsend where Juanette was on my butt here, and Philip was over here asking questions about this and telling me how good it would be to write a book that this would settle all my problems. And
well, sorry to interrupt, Calvin. I'm not asking a lot because I'm extremely fascinated with this. But can you please thank Waynet on my behalf and the many, many people who've actually bought your book? And thank you very much for doing so, because it is a fascinating read, absolutely fantastic. Sorry to interrupt. No, please carry on.
Well, I've spoken to Waynet, and believe you me, I think she's the kind of lady, if she's determined to make you do something, you'll do it eventually. If not, she'll get you in a headlock,
Oh, gosh.
Sounds like my wife, Phil.
Y'all just don't know. Philip probably does, but there's been times I just want to put a pair of socks in her mouth and duct tape them in there.
I hope the clean socks.
Yeah. It won't matter to me at the time. And she probably heard you, because I bet she's back there just kind of eavesdropping in. I got a Bluetooth speaker back there, too. But anyhow.
But she's very protective as well, though, Calvin, isn't she?
She is. She is. I don't know what I'd do without her. She has stood by me when nobody else would. Because I've been through many a mood swings through this. I go through my good and my bad, and she catches it all because she's right here with me every day. She's been through 2 open heart surgeries and a stroke, and all kind of health problems. And matter of fact, I go back to the doctor again next week and possibly another surgery real quick. But anyhow, between her and Philip, I just mentioned to Philip, maybe I thought about writing a book. He said, send me what you got. And I said, I was thinking to myself, I put my foot in my mouth because I really don't have nothing. But I just sat down to satisfy Juanette again, was making a few little notes here and there, and just letting her look at them so she'd think I was putting together a book, which I had no idea how to even go about a book. Hadn't been for Philip, it would not be a book. So I sent Philip this stuff. Next day he emailed me back. He said, that's quite a mess, but we can work through this. So I said, okay. So we talked again, and I said, well, let me think about it for a little while. And I figured when I hung up the phone that maybe this will all go away. I said, well, I'm going to go down here and go fishing. So I went down and went to fishing, and Philip called. We sat there and talked about it. And I thought to myself, I might as well write the darn book. I don't know how, but I got somebody that's willing to help me with this and keep me on the right track. And that's what happened. Well, Philip knew how I felt about editing a book out, because when I say something, I say it in my own words, and I like for it to be there the way that it is. And in the South down here, we have a different way of talking, and we have a different way of spelling words, and a different way of giving directions. Like, we don't give street names. We'll go down to the old big oak tree down there with a nail drove in it and turn right, or something like that. So we reached an agreement. Philip said, I'll help you any way I can. I know it'll probably be next year, maybe another year. We're in no hurry to do this. And I was thinking to myself, hell, if I could read a book in a week, and I usually can, I might not read it the way it's supposed to be read, but I can jump around and read the book. Why can't we do this in a couple of weeks? He kind of sent me a guideline to work down by. what the way that I should, like chapter to chapter, introduce myself, tell all about myself, and then tell how I met Charlie, then tell what happened to us, then tell what happened afterwards. So we did it on a chapter to chapter basis, and that really worked out good. I'd do a little bit, and he'd send it to him, and he'd say, maybe you need to think about adding a little more detail. You hadn't got enough detail in here or something. And I would. And that's just the way this thing came together. It's not a book like you would get a real well-educated person to do, because I didn't want it like that, and I don't think Philip wanted it like that.
Well,
at the end of the day, sorry, Phil, you go ahead.
I think you're doing yourself a disservice, Calvin, because it is written in your own words. We made that quite clear at the beginning of the book, but you may not have had an education, a formal education as far as high school is concerned, but you're not a stupid man either. And I feel I'm the same. I didn't have a great education, and neither did Chris. And I don't count any of us as being stupid. So, not having a formal education doesn't mean anything. But you were insistent that it remains in your own words, and that's exactly what we did.
But that's the important thing, gentlemen. It is in Calvin's own words. It's how he described, how he saw the events unfold, and that is the important thing. It doesn't matter what Mr. ABC said or Mrs. ABC said. It's Calvin's story, and that is what makes it a fascinating read.
I mean, this is true, in it, Calvin. There were certain phrases that you used that I had to email you back and say, what does this mean? What does this mean? I've never heard that before. Now,
We've had a little language problems in there, what I call it at times.
But one of the things we put in the book, which people may not be aware of, those that haven't read it, is there's back in 1993, you met up with U.S. researcher Bud Hopkins. Now, I knew Bud very well, and you actually consented to allow Bud to hypnotize you and use regressive hypnosis. You were down in Florida at the time. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, Calvin.
Well, of course, like Philip said, this was in 93, and what had happened, the reason that I did this, I woke up one morning, I told Juanette, I said, I'm going fishing. I'm going out to Cat Island. Now, during this time, I was still weary about staying out there at nights, because especially by myself, I didn't want to get abducted or something like that anymore, or didn't want to see nothing like that. But I still hadn't figured out what had went on myself. So I left and went fishing, and it was about a six-mile trip out by boat out there, and I sat down, was waiting on a tide change in the boat, and I was going to eat my lunch. So I got my lunch out, and I laid it over there on the side. And the next thing I knew, I come to, and it was dark. And I had all this time missing that I didn't know what happened. I didn't know if I fell asleep, passed out, had a seizure, or what had happened. But all this time was missing, and that was really bothering me. So by the time I got home, it was going on 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I still couldn't figure out. And I was hoping she hadn't called the Coast Guard, and she hadn't, but she had left a letter on my truck asking for me to get a hold of her or call her when I come in. Well, I didn't know what I was even going to tell her. My first thought was just tell her I've been off in the bar drinking and fighting, because they was blood from one end of me to the other now. But that was from a nosebleed there also. So I went on home. I got to the house. Well, the next day a friend of mine came over, and I told him, I said, look, I got a problem. It is a friend that I really trusted. I said, I got a problem. I was fishing yesterday and run up into the night, and I've got a lot of missing time. Well, he kind of studied a lot of this UFO stuff, or got into it since he knew I was in it, but he never talked to me about it. And he said, missing time? I said, yeah. He said, I know a man that's wrote a book on missing time. He's in Tampa, Florida right now at a conference. And he would love to talk to you. I know he would. And let's go talk to him. He didn't really give me a choice. Well, I trusted him enough that we left and went to talk to him. Now, the strange thing about that, too, he said, I want to look in your boat. He went out and looked in the boat. He said, did you catch any fish? I said, no. He opened the cooler up, and it was full of fish. I couldn't figure that out. I said, man, I've gone crazy. So anyhow, make a long story short, we went to Florida. I told him, I said, no, look, I don't want to go in no UFO conference. I don't even know what a UFO conference is. I don't know who this guy is you want me to talk to, and he probably don't know me. But it was Bud Hopkins. So he went in there and he told Bud that I was out there and wanted to talk to him. Of course, Bud knew me through the press and all. And he agreed to see us, told us to go to his room and wait on us. He'd be there just as soon as he spoke. And he was good as his word. Bud showed up at the room, and we sat down and talked a few minutes. He said, let me hypnotize you. He said, I can help you. He said, I've been through this a lot. I know what I'm doing. And actually, I just felt a warm feeling coming from Bud. And that's the kind of feeling you get when you're around Bud Hopkins. I said, okay. I said, but the deal is, I don't want you putting stuff in my head that didn't happen. And I'm going to be sure that you don't. I'm going to let somebody stay in the room with a ball bat and about that. But I had seen these people get hypnotized in Las Vegas on these floor shows, and they do all kind of stupid stuff. I didn't want to remember anything that wasn't mine, and I told Bud that, and he agreed. So we went through, I guess, I don't know how long. I still hadn't listened to the CD that they sent. I've read some of it in the book, but not much. What memories I'm getting now is just from my memory. It's not from reading the book, because Philip had put the transcripts from the Bud Hopkins hypnosis into the book, and he also made me a CD and sent to me, and I hadn't listened to it yet. I've turned it on a couple of times, and I just turned it off because I don't want this in my head. But he went through it, and he put a post-hypnotic suggestion that I would only remember this as I could handle it, and I wouldn't, I wouldn't just let it take over. Well, when we got the book and I seen the Bud Hopkins hypnosis and started reading where Philip had transcribed it in there a little bit, I just read a little bit of it. I went out, told Wynette, I said, Wynette, she was on the porch, her and my mother. I said, I did get hypnotized. That was shocking to me. I didn't even remember being hypnotized. I said, he did do it, because it's right here, black and white in the book. And I seen a picture at that time, just a regular old picture of the tape that had the date and all on it where he had done it. And apparently it was probably an hour or two of hypnosis, or maybe longer. I don't know how long it lasted.
Well, yeah, I mean, we found out that Bud had done the hypnosis. Sadly, as we mentioned, Bud had passed away. And he'd donated all of his archive, his research material, to another researcher called Dr. David Jacobs in the States. So I emailed Dr. Jacobs to see if he had a tape of the session, and he said yes. And I think I copied you in on one of the emails, because he wouldn't release it until you give him permission.
That's correct.
He made me a copy. And believe it or not, I had to buy, this is a cassette tape, the old cassette tapes. I had a cassette player, but it didn't work anymore, so I had to buy another one to play it. So I stuck my headphones on to transcribe it for the book. And this is where I got stuck, because here's you under hypnosis. you're all talking rather quietly to begin with. So when you start talking, they have you in your Mississippi accent, and then you had Bud, who was from New York, in his New York accent, and you had me from Yorkshire in England in the middle, trying to figure out what you were saying.
Now that was quite a mess right there.
And of course, there's little bits on the tape that you can't hear. No matter what you do, you just can't make it out. But not a lot. But I think there's about an hour and a half around about that, Calvin. And you know, we published it in the book for the first time. And I know on a number of podcasts that you've done, those that have bothered to read the book in advance, that was one particular segment of the book that they found particularly interesting. That's why I mentioned it. And you know, it related to your part of missing time. Bud talked about that under hypnosis, and he also went back over what happened to you in 1973 and before that as well, because one of the questions he asked you, and we have been asked this subsequently, is, do you remember anything else of when you were younger? And I think there's one little incident that you mentioned between you and your brother when you were youngster. Just tell us about that.
And I always can relate back. I don't remember years or nothing real good, but this is around the time that Kennedy got assassinated, just a little after that. And we lived in a small house, and my brother and I had to share a bedroom. And most of the time, either me or him, one would sleep on the floor. Sometimes we'd both get up in the bed. You know, it was a pretty big bed. But he woke up screaming one night and said that there was a ghost blowing in my ear. And it scared me because I did feel something in my ear that I didn't. And it scared me, and I started screaming. You know, you're just a kid, and you get all shook up. But he swears that he's seen it not only on one occasion, but several occasions, this happening. And I'd give anything in the world now if he was alive and I could just set him down and talk to him about it normal. And I should have done that before he passed away. But, you know, he was younger, and I didn't know he was going to go like he did.
Did he ever describe what the ghost looked like, Calvin?
No, because he got up, he would run up the hall when that usually would happen. But one time he did kind of describe that it was, well, I can't say that I can easily remember what he described it looked like. He just said it was something in my ear. And he did that. We lived in Las Vegas also, and he kept saying that there was something messing with my ear. And I noticed I've always had serious nosebleeds since after that. And it seemed like every time something happened to me, like in this hypnosis with Bud, there was a craft there, and I started getting serious nosebleeds there. But, you know, I also gave her a serious nosebleed, too. And then after this deal with me and Charlie, I had blood on my shirt, and that's why I started worrying about contaminating somebody with this blood and all, and them getting some kind of disease. But in the hypnosis, I remember now, I still hadn't read it or listened to that tape, but I do remember what happened. And I tell you where that came about. Linda Howe had mentioned it. She had read, apparently studied it, and asked me a question about it. And it just started triggering memories. And I know that was a hard show for me to do because my memory just kept flashing out. And I wanted to sit and think for myself for a minute, and I was on with her, and she was throwing questions out everywhere, which was her job, and she does a good job at it. But that's what triggered it to start with. And it got me thinking about all of it. But I went...
Carry on, Calvin, you're okay.
I went through what I feel like was another abduction, maybe, to take out something out of my nose. And when it did, it got so painful that me and this female-looking being that I was talking about actually got into a physical confrontation on the ship, and I was really gonna grab her around the neck and jump out the door if I could find out where to open the door. And if it had killed me, I didn't care how far up we was or how far down or if we drowned it. I would have the proof in my arm, and that was what was on my mind. And I think I literally died at one time on that ship, to be honest with you.
Now, you were plagued by the media, weren't you? And this set you on a course to sort of move on after all this happened back in 1973. And I think it's fair to say you led a colourful life and had a variety of jobs. I mean, I'm sure you won't mind me saying, but one of the jobs at one point, you were a bounty hunter. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
How long did you do that for, Calvin?
Oh, a couple of years, I guess. And I got my license and all, and I made pretty good money doing it. I just got tired of tracking people down and beating them down with ball bats and stuff and taking them to jail. Because when you're a bounty hunter, you don't have no rules about you. About anything goes if you after that person that you got that you're going after. And then I got into collecting money for these companies where other companies owed a lot of money to them. And, I would go and just hound them until they finally paid them. That's worse than a bill collector, the way I did it, though.
So you were a debt collector, yeah?
I was a debt collector, and I was pretty good at it. And now I can't even collect money for myself. I just get tired of asking people.
So as a bounty hunter, I mean, what kind of characters did you come across, Calvin? You must have come across a few rogues in your time.
I did. I remember one time in Houston, Texas, I chased somebody all the way down there into an apartment. And you're supposed to let the law know that you're there when you're there, when you come in to get somebody. This time I didn't let it, and I just busted down the door and went in there. And instead of taking a shotgun with me this time like I normally took, I took a ball bat. And I'm the one that got in trouble over there. I thought I was going to go to jail for a pretty good while. I had them beat down pretty good, and the very reason is I didn't tell them I was going after him, and I didn't report in. But you get into some bad circumstances, and I figured that I better back off and quit that job. Then I remember one time, I didn't know how I was going to feed my family or anything because I was tired of changing jobs. I mean, I went from my life ambition was to buy a house, get married, buy a house, have children, and have grandchildren, and pay for it all my life. And I would have been happy and just fish when I retired. But it was nothing like that. I could never remember, with the exception of being in business for myself, working over a couple of years on a job, so it's been a hard road to hold. I mean, it's just been dysfunctional as far as a family. And I have to say one thing for my wife. She has followed me through living hell, going through all this, living in travel trailers, moving around all over the country. Somebody come up, find out where we were. And I don't know why the reporters, and why, what I couldn't understand is why after just say 30, 35, 40 years, they kept following you. We was on the back steps here one day, had some friends from Seattle, Washington come down. It took them 2 weeks to drive down here, and we was all just sitting out visiting, and a reporter with Associated Press showed up on my back porch and just walked up. Now, I dealt with reporters enough, I knew if I asked him to leave, he wouldn't leave. And I had company. I didn't want to deal with him. And what I should have done was grabbed up that ball bat and beat the living daylights out of it. That's what I should have done. But I didn't want to be like a violent person in front of my company because they was good people, and some violence like that would have scared them to death. So I said, okay, you got just a few minutes. So he sat down on the back porch. This is Associated Press, and this is the first one of the first interviews that got me started. And I had put on about 100 pounds there, and he made sure that he showed all the worst pictures he could of me. And I even went to the site and I thought about just tying a boat anchor around his neck and throwing him off in there.
See if he could swim.
See if he could swim, yeah. Visit with the fish. But anyhow, I got through with him, and then next thing I knew, here this interview was plastered all over the papers. But in a way that was good. It worked to Philip and I's benefit because that got it all started again. And I'm sitting on a swing on my back porch. But needless to say, after that, I got real active, and I lost 140 pounds. And matter of fact, since I've been to Texas, I lost 15 more pounds. So that's 155 pounds probably.
So, we published the book. For those, again, who haven't read it, it's called Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter, My Story by Calvin Parker. We published that in the summer, Calvin. And, we'll be honest and say it did very well, and it is still doing very well. It's in paperback, Kindle, and even an audio book. That's what you were referring to earlier.
Right.
It's come out in Japanese. Will be out in German and Spanish, probably other languages as well. What kind of reaction have you had locally once the book came out and you were back in the media again?
Gosh, these people love it down here. For some reason, they were starving to death to hear this story, to meet me. And matter of fact, October 11th, it kind of shocked me. The city of Pascagoula had one of their little tourist people put on a book signing. I was trying to think of the word. On October 11th, the 45th anniversary, and they asked me if I'd come. Of course, I'd been foolish not to go. And at this time, I was already used to some of the publicity and all on it. And I really wanted to meet some of these people that live here on the coast and see how they really felt about it and everything. I didn't have no idea because nobody ever talked to me about it. I went to the book signing, and you wouldn't believe the people that was there, the reception that I got, and the reception I'm still getting. And it was just amazing to me to be able to sit down and talk to these people, to sign their books. And there wasn't enough time at this book signing. I mean, I sat up there all day long and signed books as long as I could. And then finally I got up and, I was telling just a little bit about it right there. And they didn't want me to stop. I mean, people were starving for it. And the majority of the audience was the younger people that was like 5, 10, 12 years old at the time this happened. And their parents seen something and heard about it. And they was telling me how their parents went in the house and locked the doors and wouldn't let them go outside and play or nothing. And one of them told me just the other night we had a little Christmas party parade down here, and the city wanted me to come to that. So I went up and signed a few more books, and the city sold a few more books that they had purchased. And one of them was telling me that their mama was sitting in the window and seen something come by. And I was trying to get her address and name, and finally I asked somebody who had bought the book. They wrote a receipt for it. So I'm going to go up today and go through the receipts and get her name, because she would be a perfect eyewitness for this account, because she actually seen something going on and lived right there close to where it was. And this lady said, she's a lady now, but she was 12 then. She said that she was in there crying and screaming when they seen it out there. So, it's a lot of amazing things happening.
I mean, have the press now treated you differently, Calvin? Now that you've got a book out and you're talking to them, and they're not, have they, because you have dealt with the press since the book came out. Have they treated you any differently, do you think?
They are. The press has really gave me a big welcome. They're excited about all this. Just the other day, I had Fox News Fox 10 News come up and do an interview with me, and they sent a girl that was originally from Pascagoula to do the interview that was working for Fox News now. And her daddy is a preacher, and her daddy had actually seen something that night. And she come in, and she was just all thrilled to do this interview. And she sat down, and it must have been 4, 5, 6 hours here at the house. Then we went to the site where it happened and asked very intelligent questions, nothing negative whatsoever. So, I was thrilled to do an interview with her, and she's actually going to turn it not into a short news clip, but in January, she's putting out like a 1-hour thing on this whole deal and down here on the coast. And it's been more and more. Did a deal with the Travel Channel. Of course, they're not the real press, but, they was great to work with. And then,
and I believe there's something being proposed in Pascagoula to the historical societies. Can you tell us about that?
It is the Historical Society. I talked to the guy the other day at that little thing. He is so excited about it. He is going to pay for it. If the city can't do it, he's going to pay for it himself to put up a plaque and to put up a monument of some kind. And they actually having a figure, Rebecca, with the city is actually having a figure made of one of the aliens in the picture, and they're going to mount it out. The little bit of holdup that they're having now is where to put the plaque. They're going to put it down there where it actually happened, but they're trying to get permission from the Halter Marine that owns it now to go in and buy that, or either just level it off and put the plaque right there because they're not using it. And they said they got the permission, they just got to do it now.
So what do you think to having a statue of one of the creatures in the town then?
Well, it's more to the town's benefit. This has really brought a lot of attention in on the town, and it's more to the town's benefit than mine, because what they do, I've donated a lot of time to them, because I owed it to the citizens of Jackson County to let them hear this story and to be there for them. And I actually have another book signing at the library in January. But it's to the town's benefit because they're going to start doing tours there once a month, and they want me to come be a tour guide for it. And they're going to sell books while they're doing the tour. And then it's a possibility, it's always a possibility that they could do a little movie or could do a little documentary on this. And if they do, that will put Pascagoula on the map as a tourist town. But right now, they're looking to turn Pascagoula into a Roswell. And everybody...
Are you happy with that or not?
Oh, I'm fine with it. It's great, because they want to make street signs on the interstate saying, when you come in, I don't know what they're going to say, but something like Pascagoula, the closest encounter, or something like that, take this route for the tour. I'm sure they're going to have like a little museum there, and it's going to be fun, because I'm starting to enjoy the fun of it.
Well, I know when you and I have been talking, one of the things we've discussed is that, since the book came out, something new tends to happen to you every day, Calvin. And you've been contacted from people all over the world. Just tell us a little bit about some of those things.
Oh, it is almost every morning when you wake up, it's something new. I mean, had movie screenwriters want to do like a sales for them, what do they call it, a pitch for it to put in a movie. And I've had documentary companies calling. They want to get this down because they say it's, face it, I'm one of the older ones, I guess, now, to date back, some of this might have happened. and it's a different. I've had someone call the other day and said, "Look, there's different types of abduction things going on, and it's nothing like this. This is classic. It's nothing like this anymore. It's more that, well, I don't know how to say it." And I have a Facebook page, and I have a lot of people on that comes on, and I try to get on it every day and talk to them to see what happens, and I hear their stories. But we have eyewitnesses come forward, like you just published another little book on an eyewitness that came forward on this, and I'm looking forward to meeting him.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is from a Greek researcher called Stephanos Panagiatakos.
I'm glad you said that.
Oh, I'm glad I didn't have to mouthful.
I mean, Stephanos is a lovely guy. He lived just outside of Athens. And in 1981, he was actually a radio officer on board a merchant vessel. He was in the merchant navy. And one of the ports they were calling at, of course, was Pascagoula. And he was also a UFO researcher in Greece. And the Pascagoula case was his favourite. And he couldn't believe his luck that he was going to be docking there. And originally he was going to be there for 2 days, but there was a delay. So he managed to stay in Pascagoula for a week. And he was introduced to a number of people. One was a pastor, a clergyman, who was of Greek origin. And the clergyman and two of his colleagues were on the way, I think, to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting that night, 11th of October. And they witnessed something fly over the road heading in towards where you and Charlie were. Now, nobody knew about this until your book came out. Stephanos had published this in Greek at the time, but of course, never been seen in English, so I published his book in English. It's only a small book. It's a research trip, Pascagoula research trip, 1981. Have a look on Amazon. It's a fascinating read, but also I think, as you well know, Calvin, others have contacted us via email or social media, and also told us that they were around at the time and witnessed something. So you certainly weren't alone that night in every respect. One of the things I would like to ask Calvin now, if you look back now to when Wayne sort of first pressured you, for want of a better word, twisted your arms more like it, to perhaps write a book. Have you got any regrets about doing it? I mean, it's too late now, but do you have any?
Absolutely not. This has been one of the best things that's ever happened to me. It gave me a chance. It's therapy to me to get out and talk to people and visit with them. And I'm actually what I thought I wasn't. I'm actually a people person. I love getting out and I've been smothered down so long over this deal, and then I feel like I've been released, just kind of set free, and I'm able to free up and talk. And actually, most of the people I talk to thoroughly enjoy listening to it. They tell me the book is like sitting down in your living room and you telling us the story. It's not like a book like you believe, like you would read like that. And well, it's actually not.
This is how we planned it, isn't it, Calvin? It's how you wanted the book to be.
That's exactly how I wanted it. I didn't want it to be a book. I wanted it to be us telling our story, Philip. And I include you in that because you're the reason this book is out, and without you, it wouldn't be no book. You've helped me in ways that nobody else. You've been like a doctor to me, curing me of a disease or something.
Well, don't you be calling me a doctor, because Chris mentioned before we went on air, Chris calls me UFO royalty. Somebody called me UFO royalty recently, and I'll never live it down. So if you're not calling me a doctor, that's going to give Chris even more ammunition. It'll be Dr. Philip next time I speak to him.
No, Phil. It won't be Dr. Philip. It'll be His Majesty Dr. Philip.
You wouldn't believe. Everybody knew Philip to start with in the States, but everybody over here now really knows Philip. And I talk about Philip a good deal on a lot of these local shows and places like that, and they get a kick because I say, well, we talk different languages, but we do communicate some in there, and they all get a kick out of that.
Well, I know one.
I must say,
one of the things, Chris. Let me just tell you this.
Okay,
when I was doing
ahead.
the transcript, Calvin talks about a tiki bar. We went to a tiki bar, and I racked my brains trying to figure out what is a tiki bar, So in the end, I had to email and ask him, what is a tiki bar, Calvin?
Yeah, the tiki, of course, you see them tiki bars all over in these other countries, where people go up and they can eat and drink and all that. But they've had one that was been in business down here for a long time. Matter of fact, the day before, Charlie and I went to the tiki and we drank 2 or 3 little beers together and ate a hamburger. And then ever since then, though, every time we get a chance, we now still go to the tiki bar. It's just a little bar and they serve great food and we eat. And the same people still own it. They just grow old and can't run it no more, so they got somebody else to run it. But matter of fact, you got me hungry, so I'm probably going there when we get through today and eat again.
We're almost running out of time. We've got 10 minutes left. Now, you've got a number of conferences coming up next year in the States. And of course, you're going to be joining us here in Pontefract. Are you looking forward to coming to West Yorkshire for the first time?
I am. I'm really looking. I don't like the traveling part, but I'm looking so forward to being there. Y'all have a place that has more history than any place in the world to it. And I'm a history buff. I love history. Plus, I've grown to love you too, Philip. I want to come there and meet you and, meet the people around you that live around there. I've met a lot of great people that on Facebook from there, and I feel like I know them personally. And I'm anxious to get down, and most of them said they're going to be there and meet them.
Yeah, I mean, what we'll probably have as well is an opportunity for a book signing at the conference as well, Calvin. I assume that's something that will be made available. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it will be filled. Absolutely.
That'd be fun and great.
We'll make sure that the copies we bring along are the English version, not the Japanese or the Spanish or the German. Because I'd like to see you translate that while you're on the stage, Calvin.
I believe I'd translate it, though, somehow. Get a little of y'all's hot beer, and that'd probably go pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, we're famous for our beer here in West Yorkshire. Chris lives in East Yorkshire, so because he lives near the sea, the beer's watered down a bit over there.
Behave yourself. At least we get proper fish here, mate. You don't got none of them tiddlers in your local river.
Yeah.
I mean, you will get a warm welcome here, Calvin. I can assure you
Absolutely.
that. And of course, if anybody's thinking about buying a ticket, please do, because they're already on sale. We've started to sell them. I mentioned the Greek researcher Stephanos, who wrote the book. Stephanos has already booked his flight and his hotel, Calvin, and he cannot wait to get here to meet you next year. He's so that gives you some idea of the length people are going to come and meet you. And Pontefract is a historic little town. It took part in the Civil War. There was a castle here. Not much of it left now. Even the Romans were here in Pontefract.
Well, we didn't have any Romans in Hull, Phil, but actually Hull started the Civil War. I don't know if you know that.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me.
They cause trouble everywhere.
But no,
absolutely.
One last thing though, Calvin. We're looking forward. I mean, people. One of the reasons they like coming to the conferences is because they get to meet you in person, and. Chris is in charge of the conference, not me. It's the Outer Limits Magazine conference I'm just helping Chris. But they get to ask questions as well. You know, books are fantastic, and you know, we'd ask you to buy a copy of the book if you're so inclined. But the book can't ask you questions, can it, Calvin? One last thing. There will be undoubtedly skeptics out there, Calvin, and there have been skeptics since day one. What would you say to all those skeptics that don't believe you? You know, what would you say to them now?
Well, you know, it's fine with me if they don't believe, but if they keep an open mind, they should buy the book and read it. Everything in this book will stand up in a court of law. You know, you have polygraph tests, you have voice stress tests, you have eyewitness accounts, and by the time the conference gets there, it's no telling how many eyewitness accounts we're going to have. But just buy the book and read it and keep an open mind and an open heart. Then if you don't believe it, I mean, that's like, you know, you have some atheists that don't believe in the Bible, and I'm not one, but I really, you know, believe that the Lord Jesus came here and he died on the cross for us. So,
but have you got any inkling yourself of what happened to you back in 1973? You know, what is your interpretation of that night?
Well, that is a really hard question that I have thought about and thought about. As far as you think, it would seem like someone come from another planet and came down here and abducted me on this. And that's a good possibility. But as far as actually what happened, I know something happened. I just don't know exactly why or what. I think we more or less experiments for another race of people. You know, even on the earth, you have different races of people, and they all believe different. Some's good people, some's mean people. And I think that's the same case that we're going through with these other planets and things. I don't know if it come from another planet. I seem to think it might have come interdimensional there for a while, or that's the way they travel now. But I don't know. I really can't say. But I do feel like the answer's close, and we will find out before long.
I mean, if you could go back in time, Calvin, would you change anything? Would you have not gone fishing that night if you'd have had your choice?
Well, if I had my choice, no, I wouldn't have went, because it did change my whole life. And I look at up until the time I wrote this book, and then between that time, I look at like all that time is wasted, even though it's life experiences. And what I should really do is write a book on all this time in between. But it's just so much had happened. You know, and it's funny stuff. I don't know if you ever watched that National Lampoon Vacation with Chevy Chase in it.
Yes.
Most of my life is like that book, and could be classified in there just like it. Such as the alligator coming up on the boat I was telling y'all about.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
me sitting there fishing one time, and I had just paid $400 for a spinning reel. One that kept telling me, you better hold on to that, you better hold on to that, nagging me. And all of a sudden, I reached down to grab a iced tea, and something grabbed it and took it out of my hands. That was $400, and that's happened 4 or 5 times in a row. And
well, that'll teach you. You better listen to your wife next time.
She'll save me money in the long run.
Well, I've not asked a lot of questions this evening because I've absolutely been mesmerised with everything that you've said, Calvin, and I want to thank you personally for coming on the Inside Out Limits radio show and having a chat with me and Phil. I, for one, am most definitely looking forward to welcoming you to United Kingdom, to England, to West Yorkshire and Pontefract. Hi, guys.
Hey,
and looking forward to meeting you and welcome. You know, in fact, Phil, we might even have to get him out a spot of fishing on the North Sea.
Well, I don't know. Certainly wouldn't go fishing with him at all. There's no way I'm going fishing with that man. Do you know, as part of the local charity down there, when he's talking about the book signing, one of the things he was raffling off was a night fishing trip with him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be buying a ticket for that.
Mate, believe me, Phil, it's far safer to go fishing on the North Sea than fishing with Calvin with them gators are, mate. I would not go anywhere near them, I tell you.
I worked in the North Sea for a while in the oil field, and I remember it well. I got out, matter of fact, we docked into Singapore there, and I was thinking, what a clean place this is. But I seen why, because you throw some paper down, they got you on camera, and they'll come out with canes and they'll beat the hell out of you.
Yeah. The United Kingdom is one of the most, I think there's so many cameras per member of population for the country. I think it's one of the most filmed and watched societies in the world, to be quite honest with you, but it still doesn't stop crime.
No.
We need bounty hunters, Calvin. Come and help us.
There you go. I'm ready.
Well, 1 minute to go. So again, Calvin, personally from me, thank you very much, and I'm sure Philip would like to say a final few words to you as well. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you again, Calvin. I mean, every time I speak to you, I find out something new about you. I really do.
It's
again, one last thing for those who are not just satisfied to hear you on a podcast, if they want to meet you in person, listen to what you have to say face to face, then come to the Pontefract conference, August the 17th, 2019, and meet the man himself in person.
I hope y'all won't do like Rebecca does me down here and lock me up in a room, not let me go out until then, because I want to get out after we get to meet the people and speak with the people and shake their hand and hear their stories.
You will, Calvin, I guarantee it.
It's going to be a good day. Believe me, it's going to be a good day.
Well, looking forward to it, and thank y'all for having me today.
The date, Saturday the 17th of August 2019, and the venue will be the Pontefract Town Hall's Assembly Rooms. We have seating for 250 at ground level. This is a strictly limited number, so access is on a first come, first served basis. This fantastic venue is situated close to all three of Pontefract's railway stations, with Monk Hill being the closest, literally a 10-minute walk away from the venue. Those travelling by car parking is less than a 5-minute walk from the venue, and it's currently charged at £4.50 all day. The Pontefract bus station is less than 2 minutes away from the venue, and Saturday is also Pontefract's market day with many facilities available. There is also many sandwich shops, fish and chip shops and other types of food available, all within a 5-minute walk of the venue, and Pontefract has good access to both the M1 and the M62. It is with honour and a little bit of excitement that Outer Limits magazine can now announce the speakers for its 2019 event. To host the event, working under the banner title of The Closest of Encounters, as always shall be Outer Limits magazine editor Chris Evers. He will present a talk on a subject relevant to the theme of the conference. Making his Outer Limits magazine conference debut shall be author and experiencer Philip Kinsella, who shall discuss his own extremely close encounter event and personal experiences. Making his third appearance at an Outer Limits magazine event will be Paul Sinclair, to discuss more details of his investigation and findings. Outer Limits magazine associate editor Malcolm Robinson will be returning to discuss his new publication all about the Bob Taylor close encounter, or as it's also known, the Decmont Woods incident. And it is with great honour that we announce our very special speaker making a trip to the United Kingdom from America, with what shall be his first ever visit to the UK, to present his own story in a public forum that shall be the only remaining witness to this famous Pascagoula abduction, Calvin Parker. Without a doubt, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime chance to meet and hear Calvin's most intriguing case, straight from the only surviving witness. Working alongside Outer Limits magazine is my co-host of the new Inside Outer Limits radio show, that's Philip Mantle, the publisher at Flying Disc Press, and Philip is no stranger to investigations himself. We are extremely grateful for Philip's continued support of Outer Limits magazine and our endeavours. Tickets for the day are priced at £20 each plus a £1.80 PayPal fee and are now available to order at chris0597.wixsite.com/outer-limits-mag. And remember, we have strictly limited seating available to a maximum 250. Since the announcement that tickets were available, they have already started selling, and very quickly. So don't miss out, get your tickets straight away.